Committee meeting to order. Consider approval of the minutes of the Public Works and Boundaries Committee meeting held on April 18, 2017. Well, it's just you, geez, just you and I, so you're up.
I'd like to make a motion to accept them.
A second, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Number 3, discuss 2017 hold harmless agreement, ISA WWA, use of a water trailer. Kevin, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, it's a trailer that we get from ISA WWA to use at our block party. It's for community outreach to the residents. We have to do a whole harmless agreement to be able to use the trailer.
Any questions with that? You looking for a motion for that? Does that have to go to the board on the agenda, or just need
Yeah, it
direction?
should.
Yeah.
Okay.
If
A motion
we
to-
have time, Kevin? We have time, right?
Yeah,
Emergency on
it's
it?
not till a block party, so.
Okay.
Motion to add the hold harmless agreement for the water trailer.
Aye.
Second, all in
Second.
favor? Aye. Number 4, discuss awarding concrete contract. Want to talk about this, Kevin?
Yeah. Okay, so this was a 3-year contract that we bidded in 2016, so we're year 2 of it. We found the work acceptable last year. They were the lowest bid in 2016, so what we're doing is looking to extend it for 1 more year this year. They are asking for a $3,600 increase due to the cost of concrete. So the concrete rates went up this year. So that would be the only change from their original bid.
Any questions? The motion, and that's J&J, correct?
Correct.
Motion to approve J&J Newell Concrete Construction.
So moved.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Discuss awarding fire hydrant contract. There's one out to bid, and just one bid, correct, or?
No, there were 2 bids. One didn't have I think their bid bond, correct, so they were eliminated, so we have the 1 bid.
This came in less than the engineers. I believe last year's was at 75, correct?
Yeah, that superintendent's estimate was $75. It came in lower this year to $72.78.
The company we had last year, didn't they have an option for, wasn't that an option 2-year to extend the contract, or no?
I believe it was not. No, it's just it was a 1-year contract.
Okay. And this being that, for those that don't know, you have to pay prevailing wage and they have to sandblast this, there's a lot more than just...
Yeah, there's a lot more to it. The reason why we don't do it in-house is because it's, you get a better job by sandblasting them and get them painted. Before, we used to just brush them over. Now they actually get sandblast painted, where then you also have a 90-day medical certificate. So it's a pretty big cost to have our guys do it.
So that's to be Muscat Painting out of East Dundee, 7278. The motion to approve them.
So moved.
Second, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Number 6, discuss downtown fountain. You've contacted the person, or the company that had the original fountain was bought out or out of business?
Right. The original company, this is the 3rd time this fountain's been replaced twice with the same type of damage. I could not find the company, but I did locate them today. They actually sold the company to a different firm out of California. So I did find the exact same fountain that we had there before. I'm just waiting to hear back from the salesman. But there's a couple of other different options out there where if we don't want to go with the full fountain, we could get the same base with just a jet stream up so there's no tears. So once I get all those options together, I can get them for you. But what we're kind of looking forward to, if you want me to move forward with getting quotes on a fountain or different types of fountain, that's where we're kind of sitting. If we get an engineer to design one, they wanted like $30,000 for the contract, or a prefab $5,000. But the last price on the fountain when we bought it a few years ago, when it got knocked down, was like $39,700 to replace. We do not have the money budgeted this year in the budget, but we could see what we can do in finance.
Okay. Yeah, if you could get some figures on that, then if we could talk to Brad too, see if we could come up with some money in regards to that. And also, you don't believe we need an engineer? I mean, it's good.
No,
money,
if we
so-
replace it with the same type of fountain, we don't need to do that. I guess they won't, engineer quote was just to see if we wanted to design something towards the branding, if it was gonna stay there longer. So I guess that's the end result is, do we want to look where it's gonna be staying for 10 to 15 years and go with the branding thing? Or do we want to just replace it with what we had?
Okay.
So that's the kind of direction I would kind of need to have.
All right. Anybody have any questions in regards to the fountain? All right, if you get that information, we'll put that on the next committee meeting. That'd be great.
Okay.
Receive comments from the public. Anyone wish to address the board in regards to the Public Works agenda?
Hey, Brian, how's it going? No comments for myself. I'm actually just reading something for Mike Paws. Fortunately, he's down at Edwardsville for work, but I wanted just to make a statement from himself to the board about the fountain. He said, we just want what we had in the plaza, a fountain. Thousands of people have enjoyed the fountain in the plaza, at the farmer's market, playing Pokemon Go, taking wedding photos in front of it, or watch the rubber ducks go around in it at the Caribbean Block Party. It is an integral part of the downtown and should be rebuilt. Thank you. So that's just a little statement from Mike that he may want to make sure that was addressed to the committee.
Okay.
Thank you.
And thanks for those photos then from yourself and Mike getting us those photos of different fountains in the area. Thanks.
I'd like to thank everybody for addressing our fountain need. My concern is with the budget of fountain, and if we go with the same kind of fountain, if we actually improve on it. I think the needs and wants of the village is possibly to improve on this fountain, get something that's that we more deserve. That it would be a little bit more respectful, and that we'd be a little bit more envious of other villages. I'm trying to figure out how we go about getting a bigger budget for this fountain. Do we have to come up with new streams of revenue, or is it just something that we can just ask Brad to open up the purse strings? How would we? I think I just heard Brad's heart skip a beat. So. Is there any possible way for us to look into other fountains? Maybe something with lights, maybe something with.
We're gonna look at all options. I just wanted to bring it to the table and start the process. Like I said, it wasn't budgeted and it's been damaged numerous times, and I believe that the money that we're recouping from the last one isn't near what a new fountain would cost. So.
Okay, then as far as getting other streams of revenue for this budget, what I'm getting at is I believe that seeing that that the village is going with the branding campaign and Life Amplified, that we might also find that we're going to have a lot of destruction in town, and we might have to get used to some things like this. So we might have to put aside some money or come up with other streams of revenue for the damage that might get done. And I'm hoping that maybe we can look into possibly looking at the bars, because they're the main culprits of the damage, and find out get other streams of them, possibly with the video gambling machines, upping the annual rate on that from $1,000. Maybe we'll up it a little bit to help pay for some of this, or possibly maybe even with what's coming up in South with South Street, possibly got a project coming up there. Maybe sell some of that property, or maybe get the developer pitch in for that fountain, because I know that's our property, and that's just another form of stream of revenues for things like this.
Sure.
Okay.
Yep. Once we look at the talk with finance and stuff and see where we have some money, I'm not going to put them on a spot here, but I mean we're open to suggestions, and I even thought of a possible sponsorship, a local business sponsor, call it the Panduit Fountain or whatever, any local business.
That's another thing that
wants
chews
to.
me up is you got this business owner, and we know that fat guy came out of his bar, knocked over our fountain. Okay, and you got this business guy, he's making over $100,000 a year on these video gambling machines. And if there's any respectable kind of a guy, he came up here with a check and said, "Here you go, guys, sorry about that." So I'm just saying, possibly start looking at something like that also.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Good evening. I'd just like to address the fire hydrant. It's supposed to be the same company, correct, that did it? It's not?
No.
Will more care be taken this time to avoid the issues we had the last time?
I've already asked the water superintendent to make sure they cut a board around the hydrants when they paint it so the grass doesn't get yellow. You're
Okay.
still going to get some sandblasting because it's sandblasting.
Exactly,
You can
yeah.
take it off.
Right.
But we are going to try, especially around the pavers and that, we're going to try to make them lay boards down. And I already spoke with them about having a pre-construction meeting
Okay.
with them, and making sure that's done.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay?
There's no one else. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Seconded.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
I'd like to call the Community Development Committee meeting to order. Motion to consider approval of the minutes of the Planning and Zoning Committee meeting held on December 6, 2016, and the Building and Compliance Committee meeting held on January 17, 2017.
Seconded.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Discuss ordinance text amendment signs. Stephanie?
Thank you, Trustee Yonker. We have been working for quite a while on a text amendment to the zoning ordinance related to sign regulations and also definitions for signage. We have some deficiencies in our current ordinance, and we wanted to pretty much comprehensively look at doing new text amendments to the entirety of Section 9, which is the sign regulations. So we've worked with the village attorney, and also the zoning board had some input, as well as the plan commission, about the sign regulations. And I've prepared a short memo for you in your packet that goes through a summary of those changes. I'd be happy to go through any of the current or proposed regulations for you in more detail if you'd like. But I just want to hit some of the main topics here. Again, these would affect Chapter 2, which is definitions, and 9, which are the sign regulations. One of the things that we're adding to Section 2 definitions are definitions for all of the terms you see there, as well as this new graphic, which I actually tried to incorporate our branding into the graphic, so it'd be something kind of special, as well as explaining those definitions visually. So you can see lots of different sign types there as well. Some are prohibited, some are permitted. It's just to help clarify in pictures. Any questions about that diagram or the definitions? Okay. Just to go through a couple other sections here, we worked with the attorney on the purpose and intent to strengthen a couple aspects of that purpose and intent statement at the beginning of the ordinance. The most important thing that we wanted to note is that there's no discrimination against non-commercial signs or speech. And this basically means that you can change the copy of your sign at any time to say something that's not commercial speech. So you can say, praise America, or, we love Jesus, or something like that, rather than having, Lucky's hot dogs or Portillo's or whatever it may be. You can change that at any time because there is freedom of speech, and as long as you're in your actual allowable sign face area, you're allowed to change that to different speech. Another section is the permit requirement. We reorganized that section, and if you look, it's similar but a little bit different, just because we reorganized some of the way that things are said in there. Nothing very new except for the exceptions, which are the types of signs that don't require a permit. And what you'll see in that particular section are some regulations for political signs. We wanted to mirror what the state of Illinois regulates, and we only can regulate the size of the political sign, so you'll see that in there. This is the only section where we regulate by content. Essentially, the rest of the ordinance, you shouldn't have to read the sign to be able to regulate it. But since the state of Illinois calls it out specifically, we chose to put that in our ordinance in order to be in compliance with the state. You can see some other types of instances in the exceptions where we said, properties often have for sale type signs, so you have to attribute the fact that they're going to need a sign that says for sale. So it says, in the circumstance that a property is for sale, you can have a sign X amount of feet tall and a square footage of, whatever size. So there are certain parameters where they could have a sign in certain circumstances, and you'll see that in there as well. In the permanent sign standards, we reorganized this as well. We added some clarification for different regulations as well as some regulations for awnings and canopies because they were mentioned in the ordinance but not really regulated. There was a lot of discussion on this particular graphic here, and we'd like to get some feedback from the committee to bring to the village board as a whole. This is the regulation for freestanding signs and the panels on multi-tenant signs. So if you look at the graphic on your screen or on the PowerPoint here, option A is pretty much what we have right now. We don't regulate the panels, and you can kind of do whatever you would like here. A prime example that we pointed out at the Plan Commission meetings was if you look at Bayberry Plaza at the northwest corner of 171st and 80th, there's a sign there, and everyone but one has green background with white lettering, and then there's one tenant with an orange background that really stands out, and there wasn't a way that we could regulate against that because we don't have a regulation to keep that consistent. So what we asked the Plan Commission was, what is your preference for moving forward? And they had a bit of a split vote, but ended up with the majority voting for option D, which is the most restrictive. It restricts the same background color, font, and color of the font as well. So we did have quite a few that voted for option B, which is really just the same background color. It has a clean look as well, but it also allows for the branding color and branding font that the retailer goes with. So we're looking to see if the board is on the same page with the Plan Commission. Again, it wasn't unanimous, and we want to make sure that we're not only looking at aesthetics, but also still being business friendly. So if we want to stop and discuss that really quick, I'd appreciate some direction.
Anybody have any questions?
On your option B, you say the same font. What happens, just name Walgreens, how they're known for that particular type of font, and Dunkin' Donuts, et cetera. So you're making them change all of their signs to be the same?
Yep, it would have to be the same font.
Well, they spend a lot of money on branding their particular letter or font on their product. Is that fair to them?
Yeah, and I think the thought with option D, it would make it less attractive to do this type of sign. Rather, they would just have one that said maybe Tinley Marketplace instead. And then you would say, oh, Walgreens is in Tinley Marketplace, rather than, Tinley Marketplace and 10 tenants on it. So I think that's what they were going for, is aesthetically, these signs, if you're driving 40, 45 miles an hour past them anyway, are you reading them? And you obviously aren't getting as much advertising exposure if you go with option D.
I'm not particularly a fan of option D whatsoever, as far as, like Bill said, that someone has their logo, they brand it, and we want to change it. I mean, I think, for example, that we've got Planet Fitness. I think that we gave them an option to change their logo right on, wasn't it by Waltz there? Then wasn't there something with their sign? Yeah, I'm not a fan of dictating how business should put their logo on there and/or color and font and stuff. I'm not a fan of that.
Okay. So what option do you prefer?
A or B is.
A or B, okay.
I like B.
Okay. I think that was the Plan Commission's second choice, so if you'd like, we can forward the draft with using option B instead of D when it goes to the board, if you'd like that.
Okay.
Okay. And a couple other things really quick here.
Excuse me, Stephanie?
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I know there's a Plan Commissioner member present. Is there anything you'd like to add to that? Maybe you could give us what was some of the discussion minus what we see in our board packets here to kind of that brought you to those conclusions. I'm just curious because, I mean, obviously the residents that sit on this panel, and I'd just like to find out what their thoughts were on this process.
Well, I try to keep it brief. Much shorter than some of the meetings that we had, speeding this one up to the nth degree, as Councilor Connolly can attest to. You guys, the discussion that you just had, gentlemen, is exactly the discussion we had in very short order. And I would agree, the points that all of you just made about the burden that would be placed on businesses by limiting them to a font which is inconsistent with their company branding, as well as their company colors. The branding goes along with that. The one point that I will add that maybe I missed it, was the thought being with option D, that the intent of the sign was less advertising and more wayfinding. So being really more of a directory, serving the function of a directory, as opposed to identifying what business is in there. There was quite a bit of discussion back and forth. It was all in the minutes. But as Stephanie mentioned, that's where you ended up just now is exactly where the Plan Commission ended up. I think it was relative, not evenly split. It did sway one way or another, but it was close. So much of the commission ended up exactly where you folks are, for the same reasons.
That's nice to know.
Thank you.
And you did it in much shorter time.
Thanks, Ken.
Trustee Yonker, if I could?
Sure.
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Shaw and, Stephanie and Paul, of course, but mainly Stephanie put an awful lot of work into this. This was no easy task, and to give you guys a little background, where this whole sign code amendment kind of sprung from was there's a Supreme Court case that came down in late 2015. It was about a church in the town of Gilbert's, Arizona, and their signage went all the way up to the Supreme Court. And essentially what the Supreme Court said is you cannot in any way discriminate based on the content of the sign. And not that Tinley had done that in the past, but pretty much every sign ordinance that I'd ever seen, that your planners had ever seen, and not that anyone would have the time to go through a lot of sign code, they're pretty boring, but what would be common is you'd see regulation for a real estate sign, a political sign, car wash sign. There were, and one you could have up for a week, some you could have up for 2. That's kind of gone away by that Supreme Court case. So, not every town that I know of has gotten around to cleaning up their code to reflect that case. I think Tinley is ahead of the game here. I'm hoping that this is kind of a model ordinance. Your Plan Commission, as Commissioner Shaw indicated, went through this thoroughly, very thoroughly. So, we'll see how it goes. There may be changes to it. I think one of the ordinances Stephanie and I were looking at and putting this together, maybe the American Association of Zoning Attorneys or something, they're on their 6th draft and trying to write a recommended model to comply with the Supreme Court case. So I think you're ahead of the game here. It's the right thing to do. I think we're very much in line with that law, and a lot of very good work went into this. So proud to present it to you guys tonight.
All right.
Would you like a summary of a couple other changes?
Sure.
Okay. I promise I'll go through it very quickly. And as Commissioner Shaw said, we had a lot more in-depth meetings with the Plan Commission with this, so we won't bore you. A couple other sections, the standards for permanent signs in both residential and business zoning districts. The only change we made here really was we looped in B4 with B1, B2, and B3, and then we actually took B5 and separated it into its own category. B5 is primarily the zoning district that you see the automotive dealerships, and typically the automotive dealerships have different sign needs because they have their dealer name, their logo for the car brand, some of them sell multiple brands, and they have service departments, so they need signs for lots of different functions. So we wanted to make sure that we could accommodate that and not have to bring all these variances to our zoning board. I'm sure you've seen a few of them come up to you as well on the village board. But in order to accommodate that need, we gave them some additional sign face area and number of signs for the B5. And we also did some we did no more changes in the office and industrial zoning district, so that's the same as the current code. For temporary signs, I just want to show you, here's for the B5. You can see they would be allowed 4 signs per tenant frontage rather than just 1. And it has to do with the acreage. There's a couple properties that are less than 3 acres that are not car dealerships, so we wanted to make sure to differentiate between the two. And also for freestanding signs, they are allowed 18 feet tall, which is what Orland Park allows across the street for a freestanding sign. We've had quite a few variance requests to the height as well, so again, trying to be consistent and competitive with Orland Park across the street for those. As I started to mention, temporary sign standards. Our current ordinance only allows 16 square feet for a temporary sign and for 30 days at a time. But it doesn't really limit the number of signs, so we wanted to sort of rework this to allow for sort of a matrix of the bigger the sign, the less time you're allowed. And so we went with, if you have 25 square feet or less, you could have 4 weeks of display. 26 to 50, you'd have 3 weeks of display. 51 to 75, 2 weeks. And if you have anything greater than 75 square feet, you really need special permission because that's a pretty big temporary sign. We did add in here the possible extension for a display period when we have certain seasonal type stores, or we have Odyssey Corn Maze that's here for a couple months in the fall. We didn't really have a way to allow their signs, so we wanted to make sure we built in a little bit of flexibility but still had, some administrative review to make sure that they fall within certain types of events or seasonal display for those types of signs.
And did the business owners have to get a permit for these signs then?
They do, unless they fall within that exemption category that I mentioned in the beginning, which has to do with, again, you're allowed a certain size sign based on a certain circumstance or that sort of thing. So.
And there's a fee along with the permit?
Correct. And there always has been. A couple more things here. Electronic message centers. We added a regulation requiring a 300-foot separation between them because we wanted to make sure that there wasn't too many distractions with them. Once you get those video message boards closer to each other, they can really be a distraction on the road, so we wanted to mitigate that with that distance. We reduced the size from 50% to 20% of the total allowable sign face area because we have some concerns about the size of some of these in relation to the rest of the sign, and quite frankly, we kind of want to discourage the use of them going forward, just from an aesthetic point of view as well as a traffic safety point of view. And we discussed possibly looking at even prohibiting them. However, we've already got, I think, over 30 of them in town, and that would make for a lot of non-conforming signs. So that was our recommendation from the Plan Commission. We added a section that sort of redid the quote-unquote I-80 bonus for signage, and we added a section here that allows extra signage for the frontage that faces I-80. It's 1 square foot per 1 lineal foot of building frontage, and we measure it based on the setback from I-80 using our GIS. And they can use that for either temporary and or permanent signage. They can do a bigger permanent sign plus a temporary sign, however they want to use that total area. So that's something also that we've had some businesses request larger temporary signs for their seasonal sales, and this would help to allow them that temporary signage on a larger scale to get that I-80 audience if they'd like to. Okay, and a couple other things. We took out one line in the prohibited signs that talked about any string of lights outlining property lines, open sales areas, doors, windows, or wall edges of any buildings. There used to be a line that says it does not apply to the display of holiday decorations for any publicly recognized holiday. It got really hard to determine what the publicly recognized holiday was because some people celebrate different cultural holidays, and we didn't want to be regulating against anyone's holidays. So in order to fairly administrate that and just prohibit them all the time outright, we removed that sentence. So you won't see any more LED window lights. They're all prohibited. And then lastly, non-conforming signs. We worked with the village attorney to find a good model for talking about non-conformities and how to address them going forward. And I think we've got a pretty nice, short, sweet section here about how we can do maintenance and repair on the non-conforming signs in town. Sorry that was kind of long, but it's a very long section.
Thank you. Any questions of anyone? on the board?
No?
Well, that'll come in, as far as to the board, it'll come in one motion for everything?
I believe so, if you'd like it that way.
One ordinance.
One ordinance. Oh. Okay, if there's no questions, number 4, building material waiver for the spec building for Hillwood Properties.
Okay. This we actually determined we could take off of your agenda. I just want to quickly explain why. We found in the planned unit development document from 2007, which is Ordinance 2007-0007, that the building is actually pre-approved in that ordinance to be precast. There was a section in the actual ordinance that referenced an exhibit, and it said in the ordinance that the 2 buildings be constructed in conformity with building elevations attached hereto and made part hereof as Group Exhibit D. And in Group Exhibit D, you see the bottom 2 images are from Group Exhibit D. The proposed structure is on the top with the rendering. And so the original building was precast. The current building at 18801 Oak Park Avenue is also precast. So we just wanted to clarify that that no longer needs to be considered for a waiver.
Okay. Thank you. This time, number 5, receive comments from the public in regards to the Community Development Committee. Any comments from the public? Let the record show there is none. Make a motion to adjourn.
Seconded?
All in favor? Aye. Call the Public Safety Committee meeting to order. Or that's you, Bill. I'll let you take over. Sorry.
All right, I'd like to open the meeting for the Public Safety Committee. And I'd like to put a motion up to consider the approval of the minutes of the Public Safety Committee meeting held on March 7th, 2017.
Second.
So we got a motion and a second. All those in favor?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Motion carried. Item number 3, receive update on the music theater security planning.
Good evening. My name is Pat Carr, Director of Emergency Management and 911 Communications. And just to give an update, in light of the recent events that happened over in England, our public safety team got together just to look at our plan. Our plan is a fully accredited state plan that we do every year, and it's an all hazards plan. And what we've done is just gotten together to just see if there's any gaps in our plan and to do any updates. And we've been meeting on that for the last few weeks all together, and we're just going to be putting it together and just make sure it's up to date.
And then, Pat, you guys are going to go more in depth with the
Correct.
trustees later in executive session?
Correct.
Right. Okay, how about the agreements with the Machina Fire Department? We have someone going to discuss that?
We have 2 agreements for you. First one is a intergovernmental agreement for fleet maintenance between the Tinley Park Fire Department and the Machina Fire Protection District. This is a renewal of a 4th year, I believe it is. You have to, pardon me, I'm just still working on my history lessons here. But I believe our 4th year of renewal for fleet maintenance by their certified emergency vehicle mechanics over at the Machina Fire Protection District.
Okay.
Trustee Brady, we reviewed the agreement. It's the same agreement that you've had in the past.
All right.
It's in order legally.
Nothing changed? Thank you, Chief.
Okay.
And item B?
Item B is, again, from the Machina Fire Protection District. This is an intergovernmental agreement. This particular agreement would be new to Tinley Park and Machina, and what this agreement spells out is an automatic mutual aid agreement. And this is different from our standard MABUS, the mutual aid box alarm system template agreement that we utilize for extra alarm fire emergencies. This particular agreement was recommended as part of their insurance service office, their ISO evaluation, as well as their their biannual accreditation review. And what this specifically details is that for certain areas that both Machina and Tinley Park on both sides decide for each other, they provide an automatic aid response anytime we have a report of a fire, certain types of medical calls, certain types of motor vehicle accidents, certain types of hazardous materials and special team responses. essentially acting as another agent of the Tinley Park Fire Department. So they, in a sense, are engine companies, truck companies, ambulances, chief officers as an extension of Tinley Park. And it was the recommendation of both the ISO and the Accreditation Council that a formal agreement for automatic aid be enacted between our two agencies. Since Tinley's in the process now of also working through our ISO review, this also would be a good template for us to consider for the rest of our automatic aid partners, should you agree with this particular agreement here.
Okay. Pat, do you have anything on that?
I don't, Trustee Boyd. We've reviewed it. Again, it's in order. I think it's the right step.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. Do we have any public comments concerning that?
Well, Chief, can I, for Machina, is that for the entire town, the village, or is it
It would be for their fire protection district limits, yes.
And what about for us, for them coming to us?
And for them coming to us
The
in
entire
specified
town?
areas, depending on where our CAD order specifies and makes its recommendations based on what companies ours that we have available in that certain geographic areas or by special needs that they might have for us. We would recommend that they come in those areas.
Okay, thank you.
Chief, I'd like to recommend that we move this to the village board.
Both items, is it?
Both items, yes. A and B.
I'll second.
So carried.
All those in favor?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Okay, motion carried. Now, item 5, receive comments from the public.
Hello, my name is Jamie Hubbard. I'm a resident of Tinley Park. I live at 6648 171st Street. So that's approximately Oak Park Avenue and 171st Street. I have 3 little kids, and we are across the street from the first baseball field. It is so dangerous. In the 9 years I've lived there, I've seen 2 people get hit by a car, a grown adult and a child that landed in our front yard. The baseball parking is vertical, and so the kids walk between the cars, and a parent stops to let the other kids out, and then the car comes around and doesn't see the kid. There is no posted speed limit sign from Oak Park Avenue till past the school. It's 20 miles an hour there. There's not a soul that goes 20 miles an hour there. My youngest child is 4 years old, and he is autistic. I pray for the person that hits my child, because I stand out there and I'm ballistic every single day. And we bought a house in a neighborhood, not on a busy street. When we bought that house, there's a school there, there's all these parks there. This was like the dream home to raise our family in. And it has become a nightmare. My kids can barely cross the street to go to school. There are no sidewalks in our neighborhood, only across the street on the baseball field side. So my kids have to cross the street to go to school. I can't even get the parents to slow down to let my kids cross the street. We stand there for 10 minutes watching them all go by. I mean, it saddens me. What else can I tell you? So we have the school, we have baseball, we have football. I mean, the winter months are not as bad, but the summer months are terrible. Like, we have a beautiful front porch that we cannot even go sit out there and let our kids play in their front yard. We live in a neighborhood. We don't live in a mean, and I can't even understand why there is no speed limit sign until halfway down the block. So I come here today asking you please to help us. Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you, Jamie. Jamie and I are both residents of the Parkside neighborhood. We got together and discussed coming to the Public Safety Committee meeting tonight based on a few incidents. Most recently, if you have heard or seen photos of it, across from Lewis Park on Riverside in the Parkside neighborhood, 10 a.m. on a Saturday morning, single car accident, a teenage driver turned the corner too fast, went up the yard, hit fortunately a very large tree, stripped the bark right off of it and flipped the car upside down. Happens to be a home where 4 young boys live across from the park. Fortunately, it was 10 a.m. in the morning. Most times you drive past that house, and it's not only their boys that are out there, but it's a large number of kids from the neighborhood out there playing ball, doing whatever. It's just fortunate timing that there was nobody in the yard at the time. It's also fortunate that there was a very massive tree there which stopped the car from going right into the house. This is an anecdotal example. Last year, I unfortunately witnessed another one over on Ridgeland Avenue, south of 175th Street. Similar situation. There was a dozen kids. We have a bunch of families hanging out at a barbecue. A dozen kids out in the front yard. Ridgeland Avenue is a bit of a racetrack. Pizza delivery driver going a little too fast. Lost control, went into the ditch, flipped the car right into the front yard. Right next door to where a dozen kids were playing in the yard. Again, very fortunate. It could have taken out the whole lot of them. The problem that we have in town here, if you've seen some of the comments out there in social media, some of the letters to the editor, or even just listen to the folks, one of the problems that we have here in town is not necessarily the traffic control devices. As Jimmy said, we are missing the awareness and some speed limit signs, some stop signs, et cetera. I understand that there's criteria and there's there's rules that we have to put in place and analyze. You can't put a stop sign on every single corner. It's not practical. Plus, enforcement is only it only works so much. Increased enforcement. You put a radar trailer out there, it'll slow people down a little bit. You put a police officer out there, it'll slow people down a little bit. The part of the problem is just the design of our streets. And I'm speaking here as a citizen here, as a resident, not as a member of the Plan Commission, but I will tell you, as a Plan Commissioner, I've done quite a bit of research on this myself. I'm by no means an expert, but in the research that I've done, I've seen that there's pretty good evidence that the design of our streets, the focus is on the vehicle. It's on getting the cars through as opposed to being a place. In a neighborhood, a street is a place, it's a destination, similar to Oak Park Avenue. Oak Park Avenue is a destination, but if you sit down there on any given day, I guarantee you we don't need very expensive traffic studies to prove that most of the traffic going through there is exactly that. It's going through. And not only from a public safety perspective, but from an economic development perspective, we don't need more vehicles going through. We don't need people traveling through. We need people to come in there and stay down there. We need destination traffic. The same holds for neighborhoods. 171st Street, where Jamie lives, is a through street. People go down to the end, then they cut down Forest View, over to Willow, over to Ridgeland, and back up to 167th. Cutting through the neighborhood. I live right around the corner from her, Riverside, which leads up to Lewis Park, where I just mentioned the one accident. People stop at that corner, and they see how fast they can get going until they get to Lewis Park. This is just our neighborhood. I've spoken to people all over town, and especially in newer neighborhoods where their streets are even wider, it's the same thing. You have people going very fast. So what can we do about it as a community? We don't need to hire more consultants. We don't need to spend a lot of money on infrastructure. There's very inexpensive approaches to doing even temporary tests in certain areas. Things from putting planters out there to narrow the streets, painting the streets, doing all sorts of things, bollards down the street. The idea being to slow the traffic down. What works is uncertainty on the road. We have to increase the uncertainty for the drivers, and as counterintuitive as that may seem, you want people to feel safe. But what really works for a walkable community, there's 4 points. The roads, walking on the roads, you have to be safe. First and foremost, the people walking on the roads have to be safe. Second of all, they have to feel safe. And third one is you have to give them somewhere to go, like downtown Tinley Park. And then the last one is you have to give them something to see along the way. None of that works if we have roads that are designed to get people through. There's streets in town that should be designed that way because it's a carrier to get you from one point to another. When we're talking about neighborhood streets, and again, particularly 171st, Oak Park Avenue, and some of the more neighborhood streets, they really need to be reconsidered for how wide they are. And another approach to that would be, as I know Lucas over here is a fan of eliminating the on-street or the parking ban, believe it or not, but allowing people to park on the streets. It narrows your streets. If you think about city streets in Chicago, you go slow. You have to, because there's uncertainty. You don't know what's going to happen. When we eliminate the uncertainty on the streets, the drivers feel safe and they feel confident going much faster. So there's a lot more to be said on that, and I would like to challenge Public Safety Committee to start thinking about a formal traffic calming program. And as we, in the strategic plan, I know that revisiting the comprehensive plan is on there. It's not one of our highest priorities, but I urge that as we move in that direction, that we consider a formal traffic calming program, which doesn't have to be village-wide. It can be targeted, it can have specific objectives, and instead of being based on complaints, which are anecdotal and just serving the loudest people, it can be based on formal proposals. You put guidelines out there, and a particular neighborhood can submit a proposal and support evidence for why they believe they need certain measures in their neighborhood. A good program would certainly keep the folks safe. It would slow the traffic, and as I said, on a street like Oak Park Avenue, slowing down the traffic would bring people more comfortably onto the streets. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
So just a few comments I'll make before I wasn't talking about. I've never thought of that, the parking ban type thing as a way of possibly slowing people down. My dad used to live out there. I understand the curve talking about. As far as talking about like why there's no speed limit sign until the curve, I think it's just because to give awareness that the curve's there. But also, I'm not sure if, I can't really think of too many other residential locations in which they actually put the speed limit sign, because I believe it's, at least back when I took, driver's ed, they always said residential areas was only 20 miles per hour. I'm not exactly sure how painting the road may exactly help, or I know a lot of times they put up the miles per hour kind of trackers so you can figure out what's like how fast you're going to make you realize that. One suggestion I kind of may have, and I'm not sure if you would agree with it, Ken, or not, but like if this is a very it's an area that needs to be slowed down. It's a school area. It has the Bulldogs field. It has the baseball field. There's kids playing on there a lot of time. Would it be uncommon to put potentially like a speed bump or two kind of somewhere there? And I only make that statement only for the fact that, at least back when I went to Andrew, once they put up speed bumps in the parking lot in a few strategic locations, it definitely slowed everyone down. But that's just a suggestion to you and I guess anyone else here on the board. But the reason why I came up here is to ask a question of, I guess this is probably the proper committee to address as to, I guess Mr. Shaw kind of alluded to it, but possibly making, or at least making some discussion as to some reform to the overnight parking ban. Not saying get rid of it, not saying this, that, X, Y, Z. As you know, Chairman Brady knows exactly where I live and my household situations. I was thinking about it before this meeting and some possible alterations of it. And I know Dean is not exactly the biggest fan of getting rid of it altogether, which I completely agree with. I know the police have their own methodology as far as what they think works and what they want for certain streets. But just the idea of possibly of if you have a village sticker and you're parked outside in front of your house, that you can be allowed to park your car outside your house at night. I know previous talks with the former Mayor Seaman at the coffee hour, he gave the scenario problem. Well, what if Joe Schmo is a car collector and he's got four Corvettes and he parks them all on the street? Is that a good thing to do or not? But I was thinking maybe even the possibility of making some kind of slight alteration to it, that if you're parked out in front of your house, that you can park one of your cars or a certain max amount of cars that can be on there for a certain amount of days. I know that, for example, in certain parts of, when I was in Boston, exactly, last week, that my friend from Southie was telling me that, there's certain areas that it's got a 3-day parking limit, and after that you have to move your car to a different location or something like that. So maybe there's some possible alterations or some discussion that can be help alleviate some of these issues. And even as Mr. Shaw had mentioned, that maybe at certain locations, if there were cars on the street, that it would make everyone slow down more so. But that's just my question and some ideas I was offering up. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn to executive session to discuss the security procedures and the use of personnel equipment to respond to an actual, a threatened, or a reasonable potential danger to the safety of the employees, students, staff, and the public or the public property.
Second.
We have a roll call on that.
Roll call?
That's it. Just Trustee Honker,
Yay.
Trustee Brady.
Yay. Okay.
And we're not going to be back out for any discussion.
Right, no actions will be taken after the executive session.